Check, 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 check. Good? We're good. Hey! Good morning, BSides Cleveland. Sponsored by Trusted Sec, our event sponsor. So, little bit of lay of the land for those of you who, well, let's do a survey. How many have been here previously? What? How many have been here previously? Thank you. How many is this your first time? Welcome and thank you. All right, so lay of the land. For those of you who don't know, this is track 1. Track 2 is right below us in the B side. So you go out that door and down the stairs. And then track 3 is out that door, down the stairs, and then out the back door to the back patio. Okay, so we have our Locksport friends over in that corner. We do have a capture the flag that we'll be announcing the results of that ran this week. There is a crypto challenge. We have plenty of prizes this year, thanks to Hack5 and some others. Wireless. The SSID is BSides Cle. You can see it. It's broadcasting, and the password is capital tip your bartenders exclamation point. Hint, hint. Okay. So we do have a little bit of breakfast there. The Bloody Mary bar is open. We do not have a beer sponsor this year, so we bought some kegs. Lunchtime, taco food truck, just like every other year. So that's going to be out the back door. In the back, they're going to set up probably around 11:30. And then for those of you who actually make it through the entire day, once we're done here, once Ben 10 actually closes us out, we will then have the B side below us, private until 9 p.m. We'll bring in some fried chicken and potatoes and some other stuff. So. That's kind of the lay of the land. I want to talk about our great sponsors because without them, we couldn't put this on. So first off, Trusted Sec, our event sponsor. Our diamond breakfast sponsor this year is Black Box and Shortel. Our Bloody Mary bar this year is sponsored by Cadre and Checkpoint. The taco food truck this year, diamond sponsor CrowdStrike. And then our Keynote sponsors are RSA. Wait, RSA? Gold sponsor, Black Hills Information Security. Gold sponsor, Sands Institute. Silver sponsor, Secure State. Silver sponsor, Stealth Care. Bronze sponsor, Hack5. Our AV partner, Something New Entertainment. Video recording by Mr. Adrian Crenshaw, Iron Geek. I want to thank all of our organizers, Justin Alcorn. I'm Rocky, by the way. And my lovely wife, Susie, who does all of the crazy back-end stuff to, organize, Wendy's room and things of that nature. Justin Herman, Josh Lochner, and Ben Piger. And then our trainers this year, thanking Tyler Hudak, Alex Cott, Jamie Murdoch, Larry Spahn, and Jason Ashton, and Charles Yost. Again, we have some great speakers this year. We try to always have a nice blend of industry veterans, and we have a bunch of rookies this year, which is awesome. So from that, I think we're good. We only have one schedule change this year. The mid-afternoon keynote, Ben 10, is now the closing keynote, and the closing keynote, John Strand, is the mid-afternoon keynote. I think that's it. So without the final words, right, just from a housekeeping perspective, we got a lot of beer, so hydrate, right? Be cool, right? Don't be dicks, and have a lot of fun today. So, yep. Oh, thank you. Sorry. Yes, and so the full schedule is not actually in the program. It's there's a link. you can see in the program that goes to the actual website where you can look at all the speaker bios and the talk tracks and subjects, etc. What was that? Okay, so it is 9 o'clock in the morning. Thank you again for coming to BSides Cleveland 2017, sponsored by. There we go. And it is my genuine pleasure to introduce our morning keynote. I've been a fan of this person and her blog for a number of years, and I had the privilege of meeting her in June at RVASEC. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn the event over to our first keynote, Miss Wendy Nather. Nather.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good morning. I like nothing better than showing Uber that I am getting in an Uber at 8 in the morning to go to a liquor lounge. That is so awesome. It's like, yeah, judge away. Go ahead. Go for it. Why am I here? Rocky, why am I here? No. Why am I giving this talk? How many of you are practitioners who are, responsible? You sleep with your phones, when something hits the fan, you are getting called and whatever. Usually we hear a lot of stuff in the press and all sorts of conferences and talks, and there's a lot of second guessing about what actually goes on inside of an enterprise. And the problem that I find is that the practitioners can't get up on the stage and say, you guys are full of it. Here's the way it really is, and here's why. Oh, and also, are we worried about Heartbleed? No, because we don't use SSL. That's an actual quote. That is a real life quote that somebody told me once over lunch. So, nobody's going to be able to get up on the stage and talk about this stuff. But since I'm no longer a practitioner, I was a CISO for a Swiss bank and then for an agency at the state of Texas. So I went from having a really big budget to having a really tiny budget. I feel as though I need to be able to come up and talk about these things on behalf of the people who can't speak for themselves. Usually I can tell because there are a lot of people in the audience going, yes, yes, or they come up later and they go, yeah, that's us. So I'm going to share some things that I think are important for people to hear about why somebody can't just patch. Now, first of all, let me give you a pro tip. If you're asking why somebody can't just X, you're just proving that you have no idea what's going on in their world, because there's no just about it. So if you find yourself starting to ask that question, stop, collaborate, and listen. Yeah, old people represent over here. So patches, yeah. I mean, in the real world, patches are cool. Patches are decorative. They're not just functional, although I have had patched genes in the past. They show who you are. They show who you belong, what groups you belong to, and they show maybe what you aspire to. Now, if any of you know and use all of these words here and these expressions, you're 12. Get out. And I should know because I have a 12-year-old. So I've had to learn all these things. But yes, these are today's patches. They are not those patches. They are these patches. So what's wrong with patches? I'll tell you what's wrong with patches in general. I mean, patches fix things. Patches are good, but wouldn't it have been nice if we hadn't had the hole to begin with, if we hadn't had to use the patch? It's a necessary evil. So I was talking with, I'm on the RSA Conference Advisory Board, and they asked us one time, they ask us these questions so they can quote us. And one time they asked us, if you could go back in time 25 years, because it was the 25th anniversary, what would you change about InfoSec? And I said, I would kill baby AV. It's like killing baby Hitler. Because at some point somebody said, oh, we have this terrible vulnerability and it's being taken advantage of by other programs. Yeah, let's just slap something on top. It'll be fine. The second coat will cover it. You won't notice it on the galloping horse. That's where the whole mindset of, yeah, we're going to do this later, we're going to take care of this afterwards, instead of going back to fix the original thing. That's where this mindset got started, and as a result, we have a multi-billion-dollar industry that has grown up in the last 25 years based on putting things on after the fact. Everything now, all the security is separate from the things it's supposed to be securing. And you guys know how this turns out. We are all trying frantically to catch up with everything as it's innovated. We go, oh yeah, I guess maybe we should secure that. So this is why I don't like patches, because patches are by definition something after the fact. I like to say sometimes that security is like the sugar in a cake. You can leave it out and the cake looks just fine and you won't notice it until you bite into it, until you try it, and then it's too late. And then just putting some icing on the top is just not nearly as good. So that's a big problem with patches. Now let's talk about, can everybody guess what we're going to talk about now? We're going to talk about Wannacry. Is anybody not familiar with, has not heard of Wannacry? I didn't think so. It's like the biggest story of, well, last month. There'll be another big story next month. There'll be another one. But, you know, Wannacry involved things that none of us were surprised by this, right? None of us were surprised by the idea of ransomware. We know about ransomware. We knew about SMB exposure all over the internet. We knew about worms. We knew about all of the elements of this. It's just that it happened to take a perfect storm to bring this to the fore, and now people are talking about what could we have done about it. And of course, the perennial question, why couldn't they just have patched? So I'm going to give you some reasons. First of all, any folks here from the clinics nearby, University Hospital, Cleveland Clinic? Anybody? Yay! Salute. As a cancer survivor, I salute you. Thank you for doing this. Those people are in such a difficult position. Anytime you have to patch something that lives depend on, or huge amounts of, of the economy or anything depend on, you've got to recertify it, and that takes a long time. It takes a really long time for medical devices. I don't know if you guys have heard of Marie Mo, but she now does all the talks now on hacking her own pacemaker. And she is pushing, really hard on the fact that she got this pacemaker and she's pretty sure it's not secure and she doesn't know how to get people to fix it. So she started in on the research herself. But luckily, the idea of securing medical devices is picking up steam, building more security in, but of course there's this whole body of equipment out there, and we'll talk about why in a minute, but we still need to deal with that legacy stuff too. It's great that we have more awareness now, but awareness only takes us forward. We got more to do there. But in general, recertification or integration testing, the more interfaces you have with the system, the slower you're going to be able to flux it. So anything that you have to update where you've got external partners or you have tons of dependencies, the more dependencies you have, the more inertia it has, the harder it's going to be able to move it and to change it. I just read on Twitter today about somebody who just wrote a book about this, about complex systems and how they're difficult to update. So you got, your network, you're rolling out an update for something, and you have to go and make sure that it is compatible with all of your other systems and your applications. You might have one partner, and you have to make sure it's compatible with everything they're going to use on their network. If you are something like, I don't know, say Siemens, and you have to make your software compatible with hundreds of different types of equipment, manufacturers, and software around the world with their networks, and also if they're in different countries and different regulatory environments. This is going to take a huge amount of time. The last time I talked with the head of Siemens software development, he told me their development life cycle was about 2 years. even for something really fast, they had to plan to send that out. I think maybe it was Chris Wysopal or somebody who had submitted a bug to Microsoft, and they were getting ready to patch it, and they had to, it was a pretty important one, and they had to back off because they had not finished internationalizing the patch. So it was not available yet in Russian or, Russian. It was, that they could not simply, just roll it out in a hurry and try to hope for everybody else to catch up. First of all, there are issues of compliance, ADA compliance. You got to make sure whatever you change for government systems has got to be Section 508 compliant. There are all sorts of things you have to worry about. So if this looks like a lot of snowflakes, you're right. I did that on purpose. They really are. All these little environments are snowflakes. So what slows down a patch is more system dependencies, more external parties. Anytime you add another party into the mix that you don't control or who is not you, as you've noticed, if you've ever tried to run a really big project with a lot of different people, just getting those people to walk in lockstep is almost impossible. And then more regulatory and legal controls, as we talked about. So anytime politically, especially let's say if the EU were to break up and everybody went back to their own sets of regulations, can you imagine what that's going to be like for software development? All of a sudden, people are going to be back here drinking is what's going to happen. Yay! And also, yes, you absolutely have to do integration testing. You've got to. Regression testing, did we put bugs back in that we did not intend to when we were fixing the other bugs? And yeah, does it actually work together? And then on top of that, remediation is more than just a code change. Can you guys see the screen at all? Should I like pantomime over here? It's much more than a code change. So here's an example. When I was in one of my former gigs and we had a 10-year-old custom-written single sign-on portal that fronted for about 60 applications, more or less, depending on how you defined an application. We knew we had to fix it. We knew we had to, it was our most critical piece of software. It was where, all the keys to the kingdom were kept because it was access. We started looking into it, but first of all, we had to run and validate the scans, and I have a whole other talk about licensing with certain types of scanners, and when you don't have money to buy a license for every one of your 60 applications, so you try to move the scanner around as you have time and as, you can schedule that work. So you have to, even scanning is a problem, especially if they're using thousands of roles, and you have to figure out how to get the scanner to scan an application using each one of those roles so you make sure you cover all the pages. Prioritizing fixes based on multiple factors. What can we get done cheaply? What's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck, which might be very different. We happen to have that developer free right now to fix this one, so this is the one we're going to fix first. Doing all that prioritization. Risk prioritization is always really hard. One time I had a head of equities trading come up to me and say, if I plug in this modem, how much more insecure are we going to be? And I said, I don't know, 5? So doing risk assessments for all of these fixes. And then on top of all of that, you've got your change control boards and things like that. In our case, our change control board had a policy that you needed to have documentation for every line of code that you were going to change. So every change had to have a documented reason, which sounds really fair on the side of it. Don't make any changes without documenting the reason for it. But when you have a 50-page Fortify report with thousands of lines of code that are going to have of findings, and you've got to map those findings back to each line of code that you're going to change to address that finding, you're looking at a couple of months of work. And again, you're back, downstairs in the liquor lounge while you do it for 2 months. So in a lot of ways, it is like the Mousetrap game. You've got to line up all your resources so that just as you're ready to do one stage of the remediation, those resources are ready. And usually this was not an expected finding, especially if you're a smaller organization, so it's not like you have people sitting around. So you've got to line up all the resources and get them to ready so that at the right time you can keep that ball rolling and finally set off the mousetrap. So it's more than, okay, so we needed to do code fixes. I knew we needed to do this. I hired an outside firm to do that. Denham Group, by the way, they are awesome. They're one of the few consulting firms that I know of that will lay hands on somebody else's code and actually fix it. There are very few companies who will do that. Getting the code to build on site. This was a 10-year-old application. We did not have a development server for it. It was not under development. We had to dust one off and stand it up somewhere, probably under somebody's desk. And we had to get a developer freed up for part-time to get the fixed code to build on the dev server. Now, Denham Group turned it around in 6 weeks. They were great. They did their part. They were done. Our developer, who was only working on this part-time, had to try to get it to build, couldn't get it to build. Another couple of months went by, and he didn't want any help. You know, we're like, we could have Denham Group try to build it. No, I got this. So a couple of months go by. Turns out he had written something, and I can't remember what it was, but it made a cosmetic change to what he thought was a cosmetic change to the code that actually broke it. And after we figured that out and finally got it to build, then we had to schedule the QA folks. We scheduled the QA folks to do the testing. We discovered that, well, we decided we would encrypt the credentials because, you know, as one does, that would be a good idea. We found out that one of the applications was actually reading the credential string, trying to read the password. I don't know why, because it's not like they were checking it or anything, but that broke that application. We had to go schedule the development resources to go fix that, schedule the QA to QA that application, then go back to the original one. So you see where this is going. You know, we identified all these surprise dependencies. Another one we found out was in the credential string was the name of the project manager of the application. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why. Because generally, if you pull on a thread inside of IT, you find what was a really good reason at the time. I am guessing that this person probably, whoever wrote that in, had to do the troubleshooting for all of these applications, and it was an easy way for him or her to find out who the project manager was so they could call them and say, we're having a problem with your application. So you find these little legacy turds in your code, and you don't know why, but you know that they didn't used to be a turd. You know, they were something useful at the time. And so again, you got to schedule the fixes, you got to schedule the QA time again. By the time you're done with all that, in this case, it took 6 weeks to fix the code. It took a year to roll it out to production. And I still cannot figure out how I could have made that go faster. If you have an idea, let me know. But really, there are just some things that you're just stuck with. All right, reason number 2. The vendor owns the system. By the way, this is the only effing birds picture that I can safely use that doesn't have any bad words in it. If you haven't followed this account on Twitter, you really need to because it's hilarious. So a lot of organizations don't run their own network. Or there are so many applications and systems out there now, it's easier for the vendor to say, look, we'll just run it for you as part of the service. But you can't touch it. Also, nobody has enough expertise in their organization to maintain Bloomberg terminals and the HVAC system and, you know, whatever else, you know, and this is going to get worse as more and more things get added to the internet. All of your external vendors are going to be running these things for you, and you cannot change them. To patch them is to void the warranty. You're really stuck with that. Other integrations, again, talking about that, nobody actually owns a lot of this stuff, and so they're really stuck with it. This is even more likely to be the case with collective groups. So you go to a franchise and they say, well, there's nothing we can do about our security because, you know, it's the The head office is the one who dictates it. They send us a box and we plug it in. There's nothing we can do about it. So as more of these groups come together, either because they have to support one another or because their holding companies have said, right, none of you are doing security right, we have to take charge of it, you're going to see these collective issues where the ones lower down cannot make the changes. And this happens a lot. The original vendor goes out of business. Sad trombone. I'm given to understand that this happens a lot in medicine where somebody's brother-in-law writes some software. It's used by a doctor's practice. Other doctors use it. It's great. Everybody adopts it. It gets bought by an enormous conglomerate somewhere, and then it either gets killed or changed out of recognition. But yes, if you're a government and you're doing business with hubs can go out of business too. And then, what do? If you're lucky, you had asked for the software to be held in escrow ahead of time, which is kind of rude. It's like, we expect you to go under. Can you put your code in escrow, please? And so there's a lot of stuff you are stuck with, and it will take you a big ramp to go and fix. Unpatchable systems. Embedded systems. Anybody work with embedded systems? Yeah. Yeah, those are just not getting patched. All sorts of infrastructure that you do not expect to have to update all the time. You're not going to be digging up your pipes. Yes, you can. But you do not want to do it every Patch Tuesday. There is a fundamental difference in the infrastructure that we've had in the past and what we have now in software, because we do not expect to update it. So literally, this is a real quote from Bill Zempf, a $22 million CAT scanner that only worked with NT4 SP2 in 2006. 22 million. You are not switching that out. You're not asking the vendor for a refund because now you realize that it's, this is a very difficult situation for everybody to find themselves in. Frickin' lasers. Yay, who doesn't like lasers? There was what I thought was an apocryphal story about somebody who had to run a Nessus scan on a shop floor, and they were afraid to do it because there was a laser on the shop floor, and they were afraid that the rumor was that if the Nessus scan hit that system, it would do a 180 and fire the laser. And I thought, oh, this is cool. And so I was telling this story to somebody just a few months ago, and he said, well, don't tell anybody, but I was there, and yes, it did actually fire. I was like, oh my God, it actually fired. So yes, real lasers firing on real shop floors. These are some people's realities, and again, you are not going to hear about them except over beers, which is why we have beer. So here's the fundamental principle, is that we used to build things to last. Nobody tells you that you're going to have to update your chair every week because, oh, we didn't do something quite right, we got to fix that. Oh, we missed a spot. Oh, 5 years on, there's something really bad with it and it's going to fall down. You got to fix it. We build things to last, and especially if they cost $22 million, they're going to be built to frickin' last for like 20 years. By the way, that CAT scanner that I talked about, I asked Bill if he knew when it finally got updated. And he said, oh, I think a couple of years ago. So that makes absolute sense. $22 million scanner. He knew about it, years and years ago, 2006, whatever. They knew about the problems. They tried to do a little bit of mitigation at the network level, some really clever trickery, but there was no way they were getting rid of that for another 10 years. So this really, really conflicts with our model of software, which is, oh, you can always update 15 times a day. Nobody else, manufacturers are not Netflix. They cannot do continuous integration. And in fact, an analyst I know who works with a lot of these manufacturers, now that IoT is coming along, the manufacturers are looking at the IT guys over there and going, isn't that cute? You just stay over there. We've been doing this for 50 years. We know how it works. You don't know anything. Just, try to stay out of our way and don't get crushed by the machinery. And then the IT people are going, oh, the IoT people, oh, isn't that cute? So nobody's understanding each other at this point, but we do know that a lot of these things, the world of things that are built to last is coming to a crashing head with our update all the time, every time we think of something, model for software. And also things that are built to be thrown away. I saw a Kickstarter or something for an IoT of shoes, the Internet of Shoes, where you could update your, you could actually display a pattern on your shoes. You could upload it. The first thing I thought of was school dress code violation. Because can you imagine breaking into your friend's shoes and making them say dirty words in class and getting your friend in trouble? That was the first thing I thought of. The second one was, notes during tests. So, but nobody thinks of these things. You're not going to be updating them. You're going to be, throwing them away. Internet of light bulbs, yeah, you're going to throw them away. You're not going to update them. So again, a very different mindset that we're dealing with that is leading to this problem. And let's say, all right, so you got to update your refrigerators. We don't really want all the consumers to try to update their own refrigerators. We'll make it easy for us to do it over the internet. Yeah, there's a good idea. Let's make it really easy to change the software on millions of refrigerators. In fact, let's put the same password on all of them, because that'll make it super easy. You see where this is going. We're between a rock and a hard place. If we figure out that we're going to change these build-to-last things so that they can be updated, but they involve 27,000 truck rolls to locations around the world to do that updating, you're going to try to find a way to do it online. If you do it online, sooner or later you're going to have a security problem. So this is where we are today. So in other words, this is not easy. This is totally rocket science. Does anybody happen to know anything about the folks at NASA who work on updating the patches on those space probes? Anybody have a friend who does that? I don't think I know anybody there, but I can imagine deploying a patch 90 million miles away, and you got to get it right because there's no truck rolling to that location to fix it afterwards. Patching is not the safe and easy thing anymore. I don't know if it ever was. I guess we thought it was because the stakes were really low. It was reindeer games. It was ones and zeros. But now that we have a kinetic consequence for so many of these things, we have to pay more attention to it. Here's another great quote, and this is how people get stuck in no patch land. So they outsourced IT to save money. Great idea. Excellent business idea. Or at least it was back in the 90s. People are starting to roll some of it back now. They signed a contract for 100% uptime because who wouldn't? You're going to ask for exactly what you want, which is 100% uptime, and now the MSP won't patch because that means downtime. Yeah, luckily that's a legal problem. You can throw lawyers at it. It's going to cost money, but at least it's not trying to send, a service truck to Mars. Another one, which was pointed out to me by Wolf Gerlich, systems of record that have to be around with Telnet-only access. They have to be around another 7 years because of law. So yes, maybe you can block them, maybe you can take them offline, maybe you can keep them nearline, maybe there are mitigations that you can make there, but still, people tend to think that these problems are old systems that everybody forgot about. And my experience is the opposite. You know exactly that this is a problem. Everybody's got these things in their data centers, and usually they're their core systems, because they wouldn't still be there if they didn't still work great and if they weren't extremely important. So I was telling somebody the other day, the scary thing is not the futuristic singularity and AI and all that kind of stuff that's going to come and destroy us. It's our Frankenstein systems that are coming out of the crypt that are the scarier ones. And what's even scarier is, when you're in that dream and you see the monster coming and you're stuck and you can't run, and you know it's coming, but you just can't move. That's where we are. Retail systems, this is really well known. They go in a change freeze during the most important days of their year, and you would be ridiculous to insist otherwise. Because sometimes they can even DOS themselves if they have a really great sale. So they are not going to have any variables left to chance or to misinterpretation. They're going to freeze those systems. Same thing with tax season. IRS, not going to be updating during tax season. Some other examples, academia, you have a grant, you get some really weird test gear, and then your grant runs out. So you're stuck with it. You were expected to use it for another, 3, 4, 6, 10 years and not update it. And you don't have any more money to update it anyway because you lost your grant. Now, the next question that everybody always asks is, why can't they mitigate? Notice I dropped the just from there. Why can't they just mitigate it? No, don't say just. The answer is for a lot of the same reasons why they couldn't patch to begin with. So first of all, they're not able to block the traffic. I do not know what happened with the NHS system in the UK, why it was hit so badly by Wannacry, but I suspect that SMB was in a very important part of their infrastructure, and they had to use it to shuttle patient data around from medical equipment. There's no use in having a CAT scan done if you can't get the data off of it. And you need to get it fast, especially in emergency departments. And because they're all one system, they probably evolved it to say everybody's got to operate the same way, and they have to be able to send the data anywhere to any hospital within the NHS system because it's national. That makes a lot of sense at the beginning, but it made them a huge test bed for this terrible ransomware and worm. So they probably knew about it, and they couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't just stop SMB. Or you could say, well, just restrict it to only the systems that really need to talk to each one. If it's a peer-to-peer network, that's not going to work so well, is it? Pay us to fix it. I heard this too. As a CISO, I would go to a vendor and say, this is really bad security problem, and they'd say, okay, if you pay us, we'll fix it, because you're the only one asking us about it. First of all, that's a lie. You're never the only one asking about it, especially not anymore. So if somebody tries to tell you that, don't believe them. But then secondly, you can say, don't care. You need to fix this. And then, of course, if you don't have any internal knowledge of the afflicted systems, if your COBOL programmer moved on, and I don't mean move on as into a different job, I mean moved on, because we're getting up in years, there's not much you can do to mitigate that sort of thing. And then there's business reasons. So I'm sure you hear a lot of talks where people say, oh, you have to understand the business. We're not saying that in a way that you have to sit down with them with a cup of tea and understand their feelings. You really need to understand what their priorities are. One of the really basic ones is don't pay for something until you need it. If you are trying to bootstrap a business, you're not going to pay for anything until you're sure you need it. And you're not sure that you need $1 million worth of security program. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little, but depending on your organization, you can be spending millions. When I was at the bank, I had a $50 million budget. When I was at the state of Texas, I had a $0 budget, literally zero when I came in. So business reasons depend on your margins. IT businesses tend to have about a 10% margin. Those convenience stores where you buy your Slurpees have about a 1% margin. That means they have no money with which to do security at all. And so, when you come in and say, oh, you got to buy all this stuff, they will just laugh at you and say, you have no idea what our business does or what the imperatives are for financially managing this business. So you've got to understand those imperatives. What is going to affect their customers? If it's going to upset their customers and their customers can easily go down the street, they're not going to do what you want them to do. So no matter how well-intentioned your security recommendation is, and no matter how right you might be, there is still the business imperative that you cannot get around, and they cannot get around. Otherwise, they'll go bankrupt. So I want to share a rant from a friend of mine who's a healthcare CISO. He really, really feels strongly about this. So I'm going to read it to you. He's talking about security professionals who are talking and giving their opinions in public about Wannacry and about healthcare security and everything. He says they are lunatics inasmuch as they think they are all-knowing about how healthcare should work and are completely disconnected from the realities of how healthcare actually does work. If we actually did what they suggest, people would die. But they would die securely, wouldn't they? And that's what matters. So, yeah, he feels very strongly about this, and there are plenty of other CISOs who feel that way too. Security is not everything. Safety is everything, unless you simply cannot afford to be safe. It's amazing how high your risk tolerance gets when you have no money. It is amazing. You will take risks that you never thought you would find yourself taking. But that's life. So here is what I need you to not. I'm going to need you to not describe any or make any comments that translate to they're stupid. I have to tell this to salespeople all the time and say, do not assume that the CISO does not understand security. Do not assume that they need education. They know what they are up against. They may know to varying degrees. They may be pretty new on the job. We were all new on the job at one time. They may have come from one environment and they don't understand the intricacies of the new environment that they're in, but they do know that security is important. So if you say, well, we've told them enough times, we've been telling them this for 20 years, maybe telling them was not the way to fix the problem. I'm just saying. You know, insanity, that whole definition, doing same things over and over again and expecting them to work. If we've been telling people to just patch for 20 years and they're not just patching, maybe the problem's us. Let's also not say that they just need to make it a priority. If you, let's say, if you have a huge medical bill that comes up that you would never have been able to pay before, but you are about to, you know, start getting your car repossessed and your furniture and everything, all right, you're going to make paying that bill a priority even though you can't afford it. The problem is that we are expecting organizations to buy this security even though they can't afford it. And saying, well, clearly you're not making it a priority. If a priority costs you your original priority of the business, then it's not a good kind of priority. It's a tragedy, is what it is. We don't actually know today what it costs to do proper security, to do effective security. We can make a guess, but I have polled so many professionals and said, for a 1,000-person organization, what would you tell them to buy? And I've gotten so many different answers. Some people listed 4 different technologies. These are the minimum that you need. A couple of people listed 31 different technologies. We all have different opinions on what you need to do effective security, and we don't know how much to tell them that they need to spend on it. If we knew that it would cost $1 million a year, would we go to SMBs and say, okay, we're going to need you to spend $1 million a year on a really good security program in order to plug all these holes? That would be ridiculous. I'm worried that this is where we are today. We don't know what good answer to give them, and yet we keep beating them for coming up with the wrong answers. So let's not do that. And let's not say they're evil, you know, like, oh, they don't care about their customers. Most of them really do. Just go and talk to these folks. They really do. Don't confuse not caring about their customers with the need to keep their business alive. Those are not necessarily diametrically opposed, but they do come in conflict sometimes. So when you're trying to think about why they didn't patch, what are the reasons behind this, don't get into the situation, the old joke about the scientist and the frog. He takes a frog and he wants to see how well they understand commands to jump. So he gets a frog and he says jump, and the frog jumps 4 feet. And then he cuts off one of the frog's legs and says jump, and the frog jumps 3 feet. And he goes, okay, cuts off another one. Frog jumps again, not quite as far. Ends up cutting off the last leg, and he's yelling, jump, jump, at the frog, and the frog is not moving. So the scientist decides that cutting off a frog's legs gets rid of its hearing. So let's not fall into that bias that, because we see this happening and because we think it could be caused by this, that it is. We could be completely wrong, and we need to figure out what the problem is, because obviously the things we've been trying for all this time are not working that well. These are underlying dynamics of a very complex system. There is the economics of the vendors, the original manufacturers who didn't know that they needed to be updating this stuff, and maybe don't know now how to start designing them so that they can be updated in a secure way, because again, if they update them in the way that we probably expect them to, there will be another security problem and there will be another worm. The forces we need on this, first of all, yes, we do need technical solutions for this, but not just technical solutions. We need the economic ones. We need incentives that are not going to punish vendors or practitioners or organizations out of existence. It's a very difficult thing. You can't cut off too many legs off of the frog because it's just not going to work. That's the wrong kind of incentivizing. But we do need the right economic incentives in place. We need societal ones. I really do believe that we are not yet at an inflection point where we are going to insist enough on security. I think people are going to have to start dying or being gravely injured as a direct result, and a directly attributable result of security failures in enough numbers that all of you will think, God, that could happen to me. And only when enough people think, God, that could happen to me, then we will start pushing for the incentives and the regulations and the restrictions on design that we need to make things to make things safer. We're almost there. Here are some things that we could do. For example, for SMBs that have well understood business models that are not too complicated, not too snowflakey, maybe we could set up secure SaaSes for them to migrate to. For example, nonprofits who need a donor database, they need a way of securely taking payments, they need a safe way to communicate, they may need other types of infrastructure depending on what kind of nonprofit they are. We might be able to build something that works for most of them and migrate them to that. So that's a possible idea. We could try a manufacturing model for software development. Today we have a literary model. Everybody writes their own magnum opus. Everybody writes their beautiful code. Actually, they're not. They're copying and pasting a lot these days. Lots of reuse, lots of assembling of components, but still it's yours and you don't want anybody messing with it. What if we told you you had to use these components and only these components, and you had to do it in this way? A lot of people would get very distressed and they'd go find another job, because people want to be creative with their development today. Problem is we may not be able to afford that when it comes to safety and when it comes to enough security. We're not there just yet with security, except maybe in high discipline environments, like defense and financial institutions. But we're getting there. It may spread down to other places. You cannot do just anything anymore. Cash for Clunkers program, talking about the MRI or the CAT scan. One of the recommendations from the Healthcare Task Force report that went to Congress recently was a Cash for Clunkers program where if you had one of these really old, unpatchable pieces of medical equipment, the government would help fund a trade-in so that you could update them. But if you just update them with another unpatchable one, you're going to be right back where you started from as soon as somebody finds another bug. So at the same time, we have to develop better software, and we have to do this Cash for Clunkers thing. I think it's an interesting idea. I don't know if it'll work. And then the really bad word, regulation, that everybody hates. But regulation is a way of getting people to work together in ways that they ordinarily wouldn't if their interests didn't exactly align. So if our business interests don't exactly align, but we're all aligned in the need for safety for people, then maybe we may have to start doing this. But what I'm saying is, and here's where everybody goes to drink, this may be every bit as complicated as affordable health care. I think I read that all the health care impacts about a fifth of the U.S. economy. A fifth. I don't even want to think about what that means for IT. I don't know what proportion IT is of the U.S. economy, but I'll bet you it's bigger. By this point, I'll bet you it's bigger. So all of the politics and all of the economics and all of the careful crafting and deal making and everything that has to go into simply making it affordable for people to get health care here and working with, you know, U.S. specific prejudices and biases. Working around those, all of those are going to have to go into fixing our security problem before we can say just patch, it's easy, everybody can do it. So this is something to be thinking about if you would like to get involved on a bigger, on a bigger issue like this, rather than, cranking out patches or doing awareness training. This is something to think about. We do need more people involved in things like this. And then finally, to wrap up, because I think Jack should be at every BSides, I like to bring him with me when he can't be here. In the wise words of Jack Daniel, if it were that easy, even you could do it. So I don't know what the answers are either. Jack doesn't know either, but we know that we need to have the conversation. So, having said all that, having talked for 45 minutes, I reserve the right to be wrong. So, if you think I am wrong, now is the time to tell me. Come and tell me. Anybody got comments they'd like to make? Yes, sir.
You're wrong.
Yes, thank you.
No, so there's kernels of truth in what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
But I think, so first off, we need to throw out the word security and talk about risk management.
We need to throw out the word security and talk about risk management. Okay.
Because it is a series of trade-offs. But the problem is, people get to externalize. Vendors get to externalize. Client-side companies and business people get to externalize. How many people in the room could push back and said, okay, you're high enough up the food chain to make that choice, but you have to put your signature to it and embrace it? Because I've had business people, senior people go, wait, you want me to put myself on the hook for that? Mm-hmm. So if you're not willing to put your name to it, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And as a CISO, basically, risk management's a series of trade-offs, and if everybody externalizes risk where they can, or they transfer the risk as far as insurance goes, but at some point the buck has to stop, and somebody has to be able to sign on the bottom line and say, yes, I accept the risk trade-off that I'm about to make. And yes, there are a lot of executives who get really scared as soon as you start putting it in writing, because they know it's a risk. It may not be a risk as they see it to the company, but it's a risk to their personal job and their personal reputation. So as soon as you start writing it and saying, sign here, please, they start to get nervous, but it's not the right risk that they're reacting to. It's not the actual risk that you're asking them to sign off on. It's their personal risk. So yes, we need to work on motivations and externalities and incentivizing, balancing those trade-offs so that people will be driven to make the right answer, even if it doesn't have anything to do with their personal sense of risk. Does that make sense?
I'm always willing to sign off on risk.
Well, you're a good risk taker then. But I know that there are lots of companies who are not ready or haven't been thinking of it, or they say, yes, I'm going to sign off on this, and then they violate it anyway. I had a general counsel who had me set up filters to stop SSNs from being mailed out, And then he tried to send them out. And he said, yeah, good job, you blocked me. I said, why were you doing it? Oh, I was mailing something to myself at home. You're the general counsel. Why would you do this? So, yes, we have a lot of entrainment to do to try to solve this. Somebody else have a comment? Yes, in the back. So are you saying deaths or deaths? Death. Okay. Yeah. Acceptable casualties, shrinkage, whatever you want to call it. Yes, there will be. And again, I think it's until you and me, you and I, and everybody else think this could happen to me any day now. There will be a critical mass of people who stand up and say, well, I don't care what your balance sheet says. I don't care what your acceptable casualty figures say. We're not going to stand for it anymore. So I think we need to get there. Yeah. Anybody else? How's the Bloody Mary bar going? I think we're about ready for one. All right, thank you all for coming. Enjoy the day.